Hey everybody! Hey. And I want to say happy birthday to Ringo Starr. I'm Tony D here on Tony D's Music Channel. I got my Ringo Starr t-shirt right here. Give more love. Uh yeah. Happy birthday Ringo Starr today, turning 86. I do want to share the story of how I got this shirt because I love this story so much. I saw Ringo Starr in the All-Star Band on September 22nd, 2018. And while I was standing outside waiting for the show to begin, to quote a Wings lyric, there was a man selling shirts outside the venue, and I got this shirt from him for just $20. Yeah, that was the absolute best time I saw Ringo Starr. Was that show at the Chicago Theater in 2018 September? Tickets for my birthday, well, one ticket, but it was just the best time ever. It was the All Star Band with Colin Hay, Greg Rowley of Santana, Steve Lukather from Toto, and Hamish Stewart from the Average White Band in the 70s. Ringo with his usual great self. Colin Hay played the song Overkill and Who Can It Be Now? Greg Rowley did Evil Ways by Santana and Black Magic Woman. Steve Lukather did Rosanna and Hold the Line, maybe Africa. And of course, Hamish Stewart did his hit with Average White Band called Pick Up the Pieces. But I want to show you something first. That's a photo with Ringo Starr and, of course, Thomas Tank Engine. That is how I came to know who Ringo Starr was when I was just 3 years old, plus watching Shine Time Station and then Thomas Tank Engine. And my old dad would point out, that's Ringo Starr from the Beatles, the drummer. And I didn't know what any of those words meant. Then about 5, 6, 7 years later, I became a Beatles fan after I saw Y'all Submarine. And I still didn't really know quite who Ringo was because I couldn't tell based on just the recordings which one was Ringo or John or Paul. But then later on, I saw the videos. I saw the anthology documentary. I saw all those hilarious videos of the Beatles and those press conferences where these idiot reporters were asking them the dumbest questions imaginable. But I want to talk about Ringo here and tell you about why he's so important, which of course first starts with the childhood. He was born July 7, 1940, to Elsie Graves. And as he sings about in the song, um, Other Side of Liverpool, my mother was a barmaid. By the age of 3, my father was gone. And he was an only child. And when he was 10 years old, he was in the hospital for maybe 3, maybe 4 years. And with, I think it might have been tuberculosis or an appendicitis. And in that time, he started to flirt with girls in the hospital, as you do at that age. And also, he discovered his virtuous skill for playing drums. He just started to find some instrument in that hospital and started playing on something. That's where that all started. And because of that, of course, he got no education at all, didn't go to a single day of school, unlike the other three Beatles. But that didn't hurt him none, to quote Paul Simon. And, he had a stepfather named Harry who he loved dearly. And of course, as an only child, he was very near and dear to all his friends. And it was I think it was 1962 that he was approached by the Beatles to join their band. And they knew about him for a while, actually, because contrary to the myth, there was this myth for a long time that Ringo was just some lucky guy to be in the band, and the Beatles were lucky to have him, that he was lucky to be with them. No, that's not true at all. Ringo was already a popular drummer in this band called Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, where Ringo would have star time, where they would give their drummer a chance to sing a song, and he would sing a song by the Shirelles called Boys, a song he made famous with the Beatles on the first album, and a song he still plays in concert. But yeah, there are several myths associated with Ringo, and I want to bust those myths right now. First of all, he, again, like I just said, he was already a popular drummer with Worth from the Hurricanes. The Beatles were lucky to have him, not the other way around. And also, like the other three Beatles, I would say Ringo was a teenager who was already kind of adult. Even as a 20-year-old, even as a 19-year-old, he had the aura of being so cool. You know, there's that great interview in the 8 Days a Week documentary where Paul is talking about how Ringo was driving a car and John, Paul, and George didn't have any cars, so that made him seem so cool. I mean, there are a lot of theories as to why exactly Ringo replaced Pete Best in the band. I mean, the obvious answer is he was a better drummer, but also I think he just gelled with with John, Paul, and George more. He, Pete seemed like a really shy guy, which I relate to, of course, but Ringo was just so funny and so charming, and that made him fit in with John, Paul, and George. And yeah, there's that ridiculous quote I've heard in the past where John Lennon allegedly said, "Ringo, he wasn't the best drummer in the Beatles." That was not John Lennon never said that thing. Some comedian said that once and meant it as a joke. But I also want to mention, other myths associated with Ringo, like that. You know, it's very sad to me that after 1974, 75, Ringo just no longer got the kind of hits on the radio from singles that he wanted. And because of that, people think, oh, well, if they were not hits, they must have been bad songs. No, not true at all. Radio just stopped prioritizing his songs because there was newer stuff around. It was the beginning of disco, and then 2, 3 years later, beginning of punk, beginning of new wave. But I don't think Ringo ever made a really bad album. I mean, that's all subjective, obviously. But in my opinion, even the worst Ringo album still has good songs on it. People often point to the album Bad Boy or Old Wave, but I like those albums a lot. I don't think that they're the worst albums. For the worst albums, they have some good songs on there. Bad Boy I think is a great album, despite having maybe one or two of the worst Ringo songs ever, but it has really great songs on there nonetheless. And Ringo, I think, like Paul McCartney, uh, is an adult who just has so much youth about him, which is why he was so perfect back in '84 to be the voice of Thomas Tank Engine and Friends. And I've read about in it was in this book right here, With a Little Help by Michael Seth Starr, no relation. I've read in this book about how Britt Allcroft, the creator of the TV show, heard Ringo's voice and decided that's the perfect voice for Thomas. But Ringo, I gotta pay tribute to you because you persevered after so much trauma. So many people would have given up after being sick as a little boy and then having the problems that you had with alcohol. But he continued to soldier on. That's inspiring. If you read the stories about what Ringo and his wife Barbara were doing in the 80s and how much they were drinking and how Ringo once crashed his car and almost killed both of them, and that's where they needed to go to rehab. And thankfully they both did, and because they were famous celebrities, they got to go in the same rehab, and usually a married couple will not go to the same rehab, obviously. And ever since '89, he's been clean and sober. And ever since the late 60s, the Beatles discovered transcendental meditation, and I heard that Ringo does that more than the other three ever did. And just like Paul and George, he became a vegetarian. Always eats a baked potato with all the veggies on it before concerts. Broccoli is his most favorite vegetable. And whenever I see Ringo, it just doesn't make any sense that he's 86. It doesn't make any sense at all. The guy looks like he's 40 or 25 or 35 or it just it it just seems otherworldly, like he's an alien from somewhere else. Now that's a good way to describe all four of the Beatles, really. They just don't seem like regular people. They seem like they're just aliens. I am so grateful for Ringo. There's so much more to him than meets the eye. You really gotta delve deep into him, delve deep into his solo catalog. It's not just the early 70s stuff. The late 70s stuff I think is quite excellent. While his two albums from the 80s aren't his best, there's really good stuff on there. On Stop Some of the Roses and Old Wave. And of course, then in '92 he made his big comeback with his first album of new music in 9 years, Time Takes Time. And I just think ever since then it's been just amazing stuff after amazing stuff. As I'm gonna discuss later, I'm a huge fan of the Mark Hudson albums that he made with Mark Hudson after the 90s. I've really enjoyed the country stuff. Look Up, I thought was magnificent. The new one is really good too, no doubt. But yeah, Ringo, again, the guy is just amazing. And I want to talk about him as a drummer for a little bit too, because all four of the Beatles did not read sheet music. They didn't know music the old-fashioned way. Paul, George, and John would listen to a song on a 45 record, and then just based on that, they would know the chords and they would know how to play it by ear. Now, Ringo being a drummer, he would listen to music, and he would know how to do the rhythm. He would just again he didn't read anything about sheet music, nothing like that. And he's talked about how back in the '60s, playing those concerts with the Beatles, and of course, the young women would be screaming and shouting and yelling in excitement, and they couldn't hear themselves, but they could see themselves. And Ringo has spoken about how he would know what to play based on watching Paul's ass. I'm serious. That's what he said. And that kind of visual thinking is how he was able to play the drums and know which part to play. And he's played with so many greats, so many musicians. Even in '71, he played on an album by B.B. King. And B.B. King was blown away by his drumming skills because he just is like a human metronome and he knows how to match his rhythm and his timing to the singer, to the guitarist, the pianist, whoever. He knows how to do that. And that's just some kind of magical skill that I think is an autistic skill. I really do. Um, yeah, I think it's lovely how Ringo is he's so in tune with everything. And he has this personality where you know, he's just like half child, half human. He still has this wonderful childlike personality at 86. The way he's given children so much joy in Thomas. And so many great rock albums. Thank you, Ringo, for everything. Thank you for continuing what you do. Thank you for the country albums. They're quite good. Thank you for all the rock albums. Thank you for all your drumming. And thank you for your true personality. Thank you, Ringo. And as you always say, I want to wish you and everybody else in the world peace and love, peace and love, peace and love. Thank you, Ringo. Peace and love, peace and love. And yeah, please share your thoughts about Ringo in the comment section. Thank you.